You did well, Count, in bringing me close to the place where I was so happy. One should die in the place in which one was happy.
Madam! Monte Cristo exclaimed.
Every one of your words falls, bitter and burning, on my heart, and all the more so since you have cause to hate me.
I am responsible for all your misfortunes. Why do you not pity me instead of accusing me? You would make me still more unhappy. Hate you, Edmund. Accuse you.
Am I to hate the man who saved my son's life, because it was your deadly and bloody intent, was it not, to kill the son of whom Monsieur de Morcerf was so proud?
Oh, look at me and see if there is the glimmer of a reproach in me.
The Count looked up and fixed his eyes on Mercedes who, half standing, was holding both hands towards him. Look at me, she went on, with a feeling of profound melancholy. Today, a man can bear to see the sparkle in my eyes. The days have gone when I used to smile at Edmond Dantes, as he waited for me up there, by the window of the garret where his old father lived. Since then, many sad days have gone by, digging a gulf between me and that time.
Accuse you, Edmund. Hate you, my friend.
No, it is myself that I accuse and hate. Oh, wretch that I am, she cried, clasping her hands and raising her eyes to heaven.
Have I been punished enough?
I had religion, innocence and love, the three gifts that make angels, and, wretch as I am, I doubted God. Monte Cristo took a step towards her and silently offered his hand, but she gently drew back her own.
No, she said.
No, my friend, do not touch me. You have spared me, but of all those whom you have struck, I was the most guilty. The others acted out of hatred, greed, or selfishness, but I was a coward. They wanted something, I was afraid.
No, don't squeeze my hand, Edmund. I can see that you are about to say something kind, but don't. Keep it for someone else, I no longer deserve your affection.
See, she completely removed her veil. See, misfortune has turned my hair gray and my eyes have shed so many tears that there are dark rings round them, and my forehead is furrowed. But you, Edmund, you are still young, still handsome and still proud. You did have faith, you had strength, you trusted in God, and God sustained you. I was a coward, I denied him, so God abandoned me, and here I am. Mercedes burst into tears, her heart breaking under the weight of memory. Monte Cristo took her hand and kissed it respectfully, but she herself felt that the kiss was passionless, as if his lips were pressing the marble hand of the statue of some saint.
Some lives, she continued, are predestined, so that a single error destroys all that is to come. I thought you dead, I should have died. What was the sense in eternally mourning for you in my heart? Nothing, except to make a woman of 50 out of one of 39. What good did it do that, once I had recognized you, of everyone I managed to save only my son? Should I not also have saved the man, guilty though he was, whom I had accepted as my husband? Yet I let him die, oh, God! What am I saying? I contributed to his death by my cowardly insensitivity and my contempt, forgetting, or not wanting to remember, that it was for my sake that he became a perjurer and a traitor. Finally, what is the use in my having accompanied my son here if I let him leave alone, if I abandon him, if I deliver him to the hungry land of Africa? Oh, I tell you, I was a coward. I disown my love and, like a turncoat, I bring misfortune to all those around me. No, Mercedes, Monte Cristo said. No, think better of yourself. You are a noble and devout woman, and your grief disarmed me. But behind me was God, an invisible, unknown and jealous God, whose envoy I was and who did not choose to restrain the lightning bolt that I unleashed. Oh, I implore that God, at whose feet I have prostrated myself every day for 10 years, and I call on him to witness that I did sacrifice my life to you and with it all the plans that depended on it. But, and I say this with pride, Mercedes, God needed me, and I lived. Look at the past, look at the present, try to divine the future and consider whether I am not the instrument of the Lord.
The most frightful misfortunes, the most cruel suffering, the abandonment of all those who loved me and persecution by those who did not know me, this was the first part of my life. Then, suddenly, after captivity, solitude and misery, air, freedom and a fortune so brilliant, so imposing and so extravagant that, unless I was blind, I must have thought that God had sent it to me for some great purpose. From then on, that fortune seemed to me a holy vocation. From then on, there was not one further thought in me for that life, the sweetness of which you, poor woman, have sometimes partaken. Not an hour of calm, not a single hour. I felt myself driven like a cloud of flame through the sky to destroy the cities of the plain. Like those adventurous captains who set off on some dangerous voyage or prepare for a perilous expedition, I got together my supplies, I loaded my weapons and I gathered the means of attack and defense, making my body used to the most violent exercise and my soul to the roughest shocks, teaching my arm to kill, my eyes to see suffering and my mouth to smile at the most dreadful of spectacles. Kind, trustful and forgiving as I was, I made myself vengeful, secretive and cruel, or, rather, impassive like fate itself, which is deaf and blind. Then I launched myself down the road that I had opened, plunging forward until I reached my goal. Woe betide whomsoever I met on my path. Enough! Mercedes cried. Edmund, enough! You may believe that the only person to recognize you was also the only one who could understand. But, Edmund, the woman who recognized and understood you, even if you had found her standing in your way and broken her like glass, would have had to admire you, Edmund. Just as there is a gulf between me and the past, so there is a gulf between you and other men, and my most painful torture, I can tell you, is to make comparisons. There is no one in the world your equal, there is nothing that resembles you. Now, say farewell to me, Edmund, and let us be parted. Before I go, what do you want, Mercedes? Monte Cristo asked. Only one thing, Edmund, for my son to be happy. Pray God, who alone holds the lives of men in his hands, to spare him from death, and I shall take care of the rest. Thank you, Edmund. And you, Mercedes? I need nothing. I am living between two tombs. One is that of Edmond Dantes, who died so long ago, I loved him. The word is no longer appropriate on my shrunken lips, but my heart still remembers and I would not exchange that memory of the heart for anything in the world. The other is that of a man whom Edmond Dantes killed. I approve of the murder, but I must pray for the dead man. Your son will be happy, madam, the Count repeated. Then I shall be as happy as I can be. But, what will you do? Mercedes smiled sadly. If I were to tell you that I should live in this place as Mercedes once did, that is to say by working, you would not believe me. I can no longer do anything except pray, but I do not need to work. The little treasure that you buried was still in the place that you mentioned. People will wonder who I am, and ask what I do, and have no idea how I live, but that is of no significance. It is between God, yourself and me. Mercedes, the Count said, I am not reproaching you, but you did make too much of a sacrifice when you gave up the whole of the fortune that Monsieur de Morcerf had accumulated, at least half of it was rightly yours, because of your good management and your vigilance. I know what you are about to suggest, but I cannot accept, Edmund. My son would forbid me. And I will be careful not to do anything for you that would not have Monsieur Albert de Morcerf's approval. I shall find out what he intends and act accordingly. But, if he accepts what I want to do, would you cheerfully do the same? You know, Edmund, I am no longer a thinking creature. I have no further resolve except that of never again being resolved about anything. God has so shaken me with storms that I have lost all willpower. I am in his hands, like a sparrow in the claws of an eagle. Since I am alive, he does not want me to die. If he sends me any succor, it will be because he wants it, and I shall accept. Take care, madam, said Monte Cristo. That is not how God should be worshipped. He wants us to understand and debate his power, that is why he gave us free will."
"Wretch!" Mercedes cried. "Don't speak like that to me.
If I believed that God had given me free will, what would remain to save me from despair?" Monte Cristo paled slightly and bowed his head, overwhelmed by the extremity of her suffering. "Don't you want to say goodbye to me?" he asked, holding out his hand.
"Yes, indeed," Mercedes said, solemnly pointing to heaven.
"I will say au revoir, to prove to you that I still hope." She touched the Count's hand with her own, trembling, then ran up the stairs and vanished from his sight. Monte Cristo slowly left the house and turned back towards the port. Mercedes did not see him leave, even though she was at the window of the little room that had been his father's. Her eyes were searching the distant horizon for the ship taking her son across the open sea. But her voice, almost involuntarily, muttered softly, "Edmund, Edmund, Edmund."
CXIAI.
The past. The Count came away heavy-hearted from this house where he was leaving Mercedes, in all probability never to see her again. Since the death of little Edouard, a great change had overtaken Monte Cristo. Having reached the summit of his vengeance by the slow and tortuous route that he had followed, he had looked over the far side of the mountain and into the abyss of doubt. There was more than that. The conversation that he had just had with Mercedes had awoken so many memories in his heart that these memories themselves needed to be overcome. A man of the Count's stamp could not long exist in that state of melancholy which may give life to vulgar souls by endowing them with an appearance of originality, but which destroys superior beings. The Count decided that if he had reached the stage where he was blaming himself, then there must be some mistake in his calculations. "I think ill of the past," he said, "and cannot have been mistaken in that way."
"What? Could the goal that I set myself have been wrong? What, have I been on the wrong road for the past 10 years?
What, can it be that in a single hour the architect can become convinced that the work into which he has put all his hopes was, if not impossible, then sacrilegious? I cannot accept that idea, because it would drive me mad. What my thinking today lacks is a proper assessment of the past, because I am looking at this past from the other end of the horizon. Indeed, as one goes forward, so the past, like the landscape through which one is walking, is gradually effaced. What is happening to me is what happens to people who are wounded in a dream. They look at their wound and they feel it but cannot remember how it was caused. Come, then, resurrected man, come, extravagant Croesus, come, sleepwalker, come, all-powerful visionary, come, invincible millionaire, and, for an instant, rediscover the dread prospect of a life of poverty and starvation. Go back down the roads where fate drove, where misfortune led and where despair greeted you.
Too many diamonds, gold and happiness now shine from the glass of the mirror in which Monte Cristo gazes on.
Dantes. Hide the diamonds, dull the gold, dampen the rays. Let the rich man rediscover the poor one, the free man the prisoner, and the resurrected man the corpse. Even as he was saying this to himself, Monte Cristo went down the Rue de la Caisserie. This was the same street down which, one night 24 years before, he had been led by a silent guard. These houses, now bright and full of life, had then been dark, silent, and shuttered. Yet they are the same, Monte Cristo muttered.
The difference is that then it was night and now it is full daylight.
It is the sun that brings light and joy to all this. He went down onto the quays along the Rue Saint-Laurent and walked towards the consigne. This was the point on the port from which he had been brought to the ship. A pleasure boat was going past with its superstructure covered in cotton twill. Monte Cristo called the master, who immediately turned the boat towards him with the eagerness shown in such circumstances by a boatman who senses a good tip in the offing. The weather was splendid, the journey a delight. The sun was setting on the horizon, blazing red in the waters that caught fire as it descended towards them. The sea was flat as a mirror, but wrinkled from time to time by leaping fish, chased by some unseen enemy, that jumped out of the water to look for safety in another element. Finally, on the horizon could be seen the fishing boats on their way to Les Martigues or the merchant ships bound for Corsica or Spain, passing by as white and elegant as traveling gulls. Despite the clear sky and the finely shaped ships, despite the golden light flooding the scene, the Count, wrapped in his cloak, recalled one by one all the details of the dreadful journey, the lone light burning in Les Catalans, the sight of the Chateau d'If that told him where he was being taken, the struggle with the gendarmes when he tried to jump into the water, his despair when he felt himself overcome, and the cold touch of the muzzle of the carbine pressed to his temple like a ring of ice. Little by little, just as the springs that dry up in the summer heat are moistened bit by bit when the autumn clouds gather and begin to well up, drop by drop, so the Count of Monte Cristo also felt rising in his breast the old overflowing gall that had once filled the heart of Edmond Dantes. From now on there was no more clear sky, or graceful boats, or radiant light for him. The sky was clouded over with a funereal veil, and the appearance of the black giant known as the Chateau d'If made him shudder, as though he had suddenly seen the ghost of a mortal enemy. They were about to arrive. Instinctively the Count shrank to the far end of the boat, even though the master told him in his most unctuous voice, "We are about to land, monsieur." Monte Cristo recalled that on this same spot, on this same rock, he had been violently dragged by his guards, who had forced him to go up the ramp by digging him in the side with the point of a bayonet. The journey seemed long then to Dantes. Monte Cristo had found it quite short. Every stroke of the oars threw up a million thoughts and memories in the liquid dust of the sea. Since the July Revolution there had been no more prisoners in the Chateau d'If. Its guardhouse was inhabited only by a detachment of men who were meant to discourage smugglers, and a concierge waited for visitors at the door to show them round this monument of terror which had become a monument of curiosity. Yet, even though he knew all this, when he passed under the vault, went down the dark staircase and was taken to see the dungeons that he had asked to visit, a cold pallor swept across his brow and its icy sweat flowed back into his heart. The Count asked if any former doorkeeper remained from the time of the Restoration. All had retired or gone on to other work. The concierge who showed him round had been there only since 1830. He was taken to see his own dungeon. He saw the pale light seeping through the narrow window, he saw the place where the bed had stood, though it had since been removed, and, behind the bed, now blocked, but still visible because of the newness of the stones, the opening made by Abbé Faria. Monte Cristo felt his legs give way under him. He took a wooden stool and sat down. "Do they tell any stories about this castle, apart from those to do with Mirabeau's imprisonment too here?" he asked. "Is there any tradition connected with these dismal haunts in which one can hardly believe that men once shut up their fellow creatures?" "Yes, monsieur," said the concierge. "The doorkeeper Antoine even told me one story about this very cell." Monte Cristo shuddered. This doorkeeper Antoine was his doorkeeper. He had almost forgotten the name and the face, but, on hearing the name, he saw the face, its features ringed by a beard, and the brown jacket and the bunch of keys. It seemed to him that he could hear them rattle still. He even turned around and thought he could see the man in the corridor, in shadows made even darker by the light of the torch that burned in the concierge's hands. "Would the gentleman like me to tell him the story?" the man asked. "I would," said Monte Cristo. "Tell me." And he put a hand on his chest to repress the beating of his heart, terrified at hearing his own story. "Tell me," he repeated. "This dungeon," the concierge said, "was inhabited by a prisoner, a long time ago, who was a very dangerous man and, it appears, all the more dangerous since he was very industrious. Another man was held in the chateau at the same time as him, but he was not a wicked man, just a poor priest, and mad." "Yes, I see." "Mad," Monte Cristo repeated. "What form did his madness take?" "He offered millions to anyone who would give him his freedom." Monte Cristo raised his eyes heavenwards but could not see the heavens. There was a veil of stone between him and the firmament. He considered that there had been no less impenetrable a veil between the eyes of those to whom Abbé Faria had offered his treasures and the treasures which he was offering them.
Could the prisoners meet one another? He asked.
Oh, no, monsieur, that was expressly forbidden.
But they got round the prohibition by digging a tunnel between one dungeon and the other. And which of the two dug this tunnel?
Oh, it must surely have been the young one, said the concierge. He was industrious and strong, while the poor abbé was old and weak. In any case, his mind wandered too much for him to concentrate on one idea.
How blind! Monte Cristo murmured.
So it was, the concierge went on, that the young man drove this tunnel. How, no one knows, but he did drive it through, and the proof is that you can still see the marks, there, do you see? And he brought his torch up to the wall. Ah, yes, indeed, said the Count, his voice choked with emotion. The outcome was that the two prisoners could communicate with one another, no one has any idea for how long. Then, one day, the old man fell ill and died.
And guess what the young one did, he said, interrupting his narrative. Tell me. He took away the body of the dead man, put him in his own bed with his face turned towards the wall, then returned to the empty dungeon, blocked the hole and slipped into the dead man's winding sheet. Can you imagine such a thing?
Monte Cristo closed his eyes and felt again every sensation that he had undergone when the rough cloth rubbed against his face, still cold from the corpse. The keeper went on, you see, this was his plan. He thought that they buried dead bodies in the Château d'If and, as he guessed that they would not go to the expense of a coffin for the prisoners, he imagined he would be able to lift up the earth with his shoulders. But unfortunately there was a custom here on the island that upset his plans. The dead weren't buried, they just had a cannonball fastened around their legs and were thrown into the sea.
And that's what happened. Our man was thrown into the water from the top of the gallery.
The next day, they found the real body in his bed and guessed everything, because the burial party said something that they had not dared to admit up to then, which was that at the moment when the body was thrown out into the void, they heard a dreadful cry, instantly smothered beneath the water into which he was thrown. The Count had difficulty breathing, sweat was pouring down his forehead and his heart was gripped with anguish.
No, he muttered. No.
That doubt which I experienced was the sign that I was starting to forget, but here the heart is mine once more and feels once more a hunger for revenge.
And this prisoner, he asked, did anyone hear of him again?
Never, not a word.
You see, there are only two possibilities.
Either he fell flat and, since he was falling from 50 feet, he would have been killed instantly. You said that they tied a cannonball to his feet, in that case, he would have fallen standing up. Or else he fell standing up, the concierge went on, and in that case the weight on his feet would have dragged him to the bottom, and there he stayed, poor fellow.
Do you pity him?
Good heavens, yes, even though he was in his element.
Why do you say that?
The rumor was that the poor man had once been a naval officer, arrested for Bonapartism.
Ah, truth, the Count muttered, God made you to float above the waves and the flames.
So the poor sailor does live in the memory of some storytellers. They retell his dreadful tale at the fireside and shudder at the moment when he flew through the air and was swallowed up by the sea.
Did they ever know his name? He asked aloud.
What? Said the keeper. Oh, yes. He was only known as number 34.
Villefort, Villefort. Monte Cristo muttered.
That is what you must often have told yourself when my spectre haunted your sleepless nights.
Would the gentleman like to continue the tour? The concierge asked.
Yes, and I'd particularly like to see the poor abbé's room.
Ah, number 27?
Yes, number 27. It seemed he could still hear Abbé Faria's voice when he asked him his name, and the abbé called back that number through the wall.
Come.
Wait, said Monte Cristo. Let me cast a final glance over every aspect of this dungeon.
Just as well, said the guide. I forgot to bring the key to the other. Then go and fetch it. I'll leave you the torch. No, take it with you. But you will have to stay here without a light. I can see in the dark. Why, just like him. Like whom? Number 34. They say he was so used to the dark that he could have seen a pin in the darkest corner of his cell. It took him 10 years to reach that point, the Count muttered as the guide went off, carrying the torch. The Count was right. He had hardly been a few moments in the dark before he could see everything as if in broad daylight. So he looked all round him and truly recognized his dungeons. Yes, he said, there is the stone on which I used to sit. There is the trace of my shoulders where they have worn their imprint in the wall. There is the mark of the blood that flowed from my forehead, the day when I tried to dash out my brains against the wall. Oh, those figures! I remember. I made them one day when I was calculating the age of my father to know if I would find him alive, and the age of Mercedes to know if I should find her free. I had a moment's hope after doing those sums. I had not counted on starvation and infidelity. A bitter laugh escaped him. As if in a dream, he had just seen his father being taken to the tomb and Mercedes walking to the altar. He was struck by an inscription on the far wall. Still white, it stood out against the greenish stones. My God, he read. Let me not forget. Yes, yes, he said. That was my only prayer in my last years. I no longer asked for freedom, I asked for memory, and was afraid I should become mad and forget. My God, you did preserve my memory and I have not forgotten. Thank you, God, thank you. At that moment the light of the torch was reflected off the walls, the guide had returned. Monte Cristo went to meet him. Follow me, the man said, and, without needing to return to the daylight, he took him down an underground corridor which led to another entrance. Here, too, Monte Cristo was overwhelmed with a host of thoughts. The first thing that struck him was the meridian on the wall by which Abbé Faria counted the hours. Then there were the remains of the bed on which the poor prisoner died. At the sight of this, instead of the anguish he had felt in his own dungeon, a sweet and tender feeling, a feeling of gratitude, filled his heart, and 2 tears rolled down his cheeks. Here, said the guide, is where they kept the mad priest. And there is the place through which the young man came to join him. And he showed Monte Cristo the opening to the tunnel which, on this side, had been left uncovered. By the color of the stone, he went on, a scientist realized that they must have been in communication with each other for about 10 years. Poor folk, how miserable they must have been, those 10 years. Dantes took a few louis from his pocket and handed them to the man who, for the second time, had felt sorry for him without knowing who he was. The concierge accepted the money, thinking that it must be a few small coins. Then, in the light of the torch, he realized how much the visitor had given him. Monsieur, he said, you've made a mistake. What do you mean? You have given me gold. I know that. What? You know? Yes. And you intended to give me this gold? Yes. So I can keep it in all conscience? Yes. The concierge looked at Monte Cristo in amazement. In honesty, the Count said, like Hamlet. Point 3. Monsieur, the concierge said, not daring to believe in his good fortune. I do not understand your generosity. It's simple enough, my friend, said the Count. I used to be a sailor, and your story touched me more than it might another person. So, monsieur, the guide said, as you were so generous, you deserve a present. What can you give me, friend? Seashells, straw dolls? No thank you. Not at all, monsieur, something that has to do with the story I just told you. Really, the Count exclaimed. "What is it?"
"Listen," the concierge said.
"Here's what happened.
I thought to myself, there's always something to be found in a room where a prisoner has lived for 15 years, so I began to tap the walls."
"Ah," Monte Cristo said, remembering the abbé's double hiding place. "As you say."
"So by looking," the concierge went on, "I discovered that there really was a hollow sound at the head of the bed and under the hearth."
"Yes," Monte Cristo said. "Yes, I lifted the stones, and I found—"
"A rope ladder and tools?"
the Count cried. "How did you know that?" the concierge asked in astonishment.
"I don't know, I guessed," the Count said.
"Those are the sort of things that one usually finds in prisoners' hiding places."
"Yes, monsieur," the guide said.
"A rope ladder and some tools. Do you still have them?" Monte Cristo asked eagerly. "No, monsieur.
I sold the various things, which were very unusual, to visitors.
But I do have something else."
"What is that?"
the Count asked impatiently.
"I have a sort of book, written on strips of cloth."
"Oh!" Monte Cristo cried. "You have such a book?"
"I don't know if it is a book," said the concierge.
"But I do have what I told you."
"Go and fetch it, my friend," said the Count.
"Go, and if it's what I think, don't worry."
"I'm going, monsieur."
And the guide left.
At this, the Count went to kneel piously in front of the remains of the bed which death had made an altar for him.
"Oh, my second father," he said.
"You who gave me liberty, knowledge, riches, you who, like those beings of some higher essence than ourselves, had an understanding of good and evil, if in the depths of the tomb something remains of us which still shudders to hear the voices of those who have remained on earth, if in the transfiguration undergone by the body in death, something animate remains in the places where we have greatly loved or greatly suffered, noble heart, supreme spirit, profound soul, I beg you by some word, some sign or some revelation, in the name of the paternal love which you gave me and the filial respect that I return to you, take away this remaining doubt that, if it does not become a certainty, will turn into remorse."
The Count bent his head and clasped his hands.
"Here, monsieur," said a voice behind him. He started and turned around. The concierge was holding out the strips of cloth to which Abbé Faria had entrusted all the fruits of his wisdom.
This was the manuscript of Abbé Faria's great work on the monarchy in Italy.
The Count seized it eagerly, and the first thing his eyes met was the epigraph, which read, "You will pull the dragon's teeth and trample the lions underfoot, said the Lord."
"Ah," he cried. "There is my answer. Thank you, Father, thank you."
Taking out of his pocket a small wallet containing 10 banknotes of 1,000 francs each, he said, "Here, take this."
"Are you giving it to me?"
"Yes,
on condition that you do not look inside it until after I have gone."
Placing the relic which he had just found against his chest, a relic which for him was worth the most precious treasure, he hurried out of the underground tunnel and stepped back into the boat, with the order, to Marseille. As they were pulling away, he looked back towards the grim fortress and said, "Woe betide those who had me shut up in that awful place and those who forgot that I was imprisoned there." As they sailed back past Les Catalans, the Count turned away, wrapped his head in his cloak and muttered a woman's name. The victory was complete. Twice he had driven away his doubts. And the name which he spoke with an expression of tenderness that was close to love, was that of Haiti. On reaching land, Monte Cristo set off for the cemetery where he knew he would find Morel. 10 years earlier, he too had piously searched out a tomb in this graveyard, but he had searched in vain. Returning to France a millionaire, he had been unable to find the tomb of his father, who had starved to death. Morel had indeed arranged for a cross to be raised, but the cross had fallen and the gravedigger had burned it, as gravediggers do with old pieces of wood lying around in cemeteries. The worthy merchant had been luckier. He died in the arms of his children, who laid him to rest beside his wife, who had preceded him by 2 years into eternity. 2 large slabs of marble bearing their names lay, one beside the other, in a little plot surrounded by an iron railing, in the shade of 4 cypress trees. Maximilian was leaning against one of these, staring at the 2 graves but seeing nothing. His agony was profound and he was in almost a state of distraction. "Maximilian," the Count said, "that is not where you should be looking, but there." And he pointed to heaven. "The dead are all around us," said Morel. "Isn't that what you told me yourself when you took me away from Paris?" "Maximilian," the Count said, "during the journey you asked me to stop for a few days in Marseille. Is that still what you want?" "I no longer want anything, Count. But I feel that I shall wait with less displeasure here than elsewhere." "So much the better, Maximilian, because I am leaving you, but taking your word of honor with me, I think." "Oh, I shall forget it, Count," said Morel. "I shall forget it." "No, you will not forget, because before all else you are a man of honor, Morel, because you have sworn and because you must swear again." "Please, Count, have pity on me. I am so unhappy." "I once knew a man who was more unhappy than you, Morel." "Impossible." "Alas," said Monte Cristo, "our poor species can pride itself on the fact that every man thinks himself unhappier than another unfortunate, weeping and moaning beside him. What can be more unhappy than a man who had lost the only thing in the world that he loved and desired?" "Listen, Morel," Monte Cristo said, "and concentrate for a moment on what I am about to tell you. I knew a man who, like you, placed all his expectations of happiness in a woman. He was young and had an old father whom he loved and a fiancée whom he adored. He was about to marry her when suddenly one of those twists of fate, which would make us doubt the existence of God if God did not reveal himself later by demonstrating that everything is to him a means by which to lead us to his infinite oneness, when suddenly a twist of fate took away his freedom, his fiancée, and the future he dreamed of, which he believed was his. Blind as he was, he could only read the here and now, and threw him in the depths of a dungeon." "Oh, yes," Morel said. "But people come out of dungeons, after a week, or a month, or a year." "He stayed there for 14 years, Morel," the Count said, putting his hand on the young man's shoulder. Maximilian shuddered. 14 years, he murmured. 14 years, the Count repeated. And he too, in those 14 years, had many moments of despair. He too, like you, Morel, thinking himself the most unhappy of men, wanted to kill himself. "And?" Morel asked. "And at the very last moment God revealed himself to him by human means, because God no longer performs miracles. Perhaps at first, because eyes clouded by tears need some time to clear entirely, he did not understand the infinite mercy of the Lord. But he was patient and waited. One day he miraculously emerged from his tomb, transfigured, rich, powerful, almost a god. His first thought was for his father, but his father was dead." "My father too is dead," said Morel. "Yes, but he died in your arms, loved, happy, honored, rich and full of years. This man's father died poor, desperate, doubting God, and when, 10 years after his death, his son looked for the grave, even that had vanished, and no one could tell him, 'Here is where the heart that loved you so sleeps in the Lord.'" "Oh," said Morel. "So, as a son, he was unhappier than you are, Morel. He did not even know where to find his father's grave." "Yes," said Morel, "but he did still have the woman whom he loved." "You are wrong, Morel. The woman. Was she dead?" Maximilian cried. "Worse. She had been unfaithful and married one of her fiancé's tormentors. So you see, Morel, the man was more unfortunate even than you are." "And did God send him consolation?" Morel asked. "He did at least send him tranquility." "And might he still be happy one day?"
He hopes so, Maximilian.
The young man bowed his head and, after a moment's silence, said, "You have my promise, but, remember," and he offered Monte Cristo his hand. "On October the 5th, moral, I shall expect you on the island of Monte Cristo.
On the 4th a yacht will be waiting for you in the port at Bastia. The yacht will be called the Eurus. You will tell the master your name and he will bring you to me. That's agreed, isn't it, Maximilian?"
"Agreed, Count, and I shall do as we have agreed.
But remember that on October the 5th.
Child, who does not yet know what a man's promise means? I have told you 20 times that on that day, if you still want to die, I shall help you.
Now, farewell."
Are you leaving me?
Yes, I have business in Italy.
I am leaving you alone with your grief, alone with that powerful eagle which the Lord sends to his elect to transport them to his feet. The story of Ganymede 4 is not a fable,
Maximilian, but an allegory. When will you leave?
Immediately. The steamship is waiting for me, and in an hour I shall already be far away.
Will you come with me to the port?
I am entirely at your disposal, Count.
Embrace me.
Morrel walked with the Count down to the port. Already a huge plume of smoke was pouring out of the black tube which cast it upwards towards the skies. Shortly afterwards the boat set out, and an hour later, as Monte Cristo had said, the same trail of smoke was barely visible, streaking an eastern horizon darkened by the first shades of night.
Xiv. Peppino.
At the very same moment as the Count's steamship was vanishing behind the Cap Morgiou, a man, traveling by the mail on the road from Florence to Rome, had just left the little town of Aquapendente. Doing some of the journey on foot, he covered a lot of ground without attracting suspicion. Dressed in a frockcoat or, rather, an overcoat, much worn by travel but showing the ribbon of the Legion of Honor sewn onto it, still bright and shining, the man was recognizably French, not only by his dress and his decoration, but also by the accent in which he addressed the postilion. Another proof that he had been born in that land, with its universal language, was that he knew no other Italian words except those pertaining to music which, like Figaro's goddamn, one can stand in for all the subtleties of a particular tongue.
Allegro, he cried to the coachman as they went up a hill. Moderato, he cried every time they went down.
God knows, there are plenty of hills, up and down, between Florence and Rome along the road through Aquapendente. The two words, of course, caused enormous hilarity among the good fellows to whom they were addressed. Once in the presence of the Eternal City, that is to say on arriving at La Storta, the point from which one may catch sight of Rome, the traveler did not experience the feeling of fervent curiosity that impels every foreigner to rise from his seat in an attempt to see the famous dome of St. Peter's, which can be glimpsed long before anything else.
No.
He merely took a portfolio from his pocket and, from the portfolio, a piece of paper folded 4 times, which he unfolded and refolded with an intensity that was close to respect, saying only, "Good, I still have it." The carriage entered through the Porta del Popolo, turned left and stopped at the Hotel de Londres. Our old friend Signor Pastrini greeted the traveler on the doorstep, cap in hand.
The traveler got down, ordered a good dinner and asked for the address of the firm of Thomson and French, which was instantly pointed out to him, since the firm was one of the best known in Rome. It was situated in the Via dei Banchi, near St. Peter's. In Rome, as anywhere else, the arrival of a stagecoach is an event.
10 young descendants of Marius and the Gracchi, 2 barefoot and with holes at their elbows, but with one hand on their hip and the other arm picturesquely bent above their head, watched the traveler, the postchaise, and the horses. These typical Roman ragazzi had been joined by some 50 idlers from the Papal States, of the sort who make rings on the water by spitting into the Tiber from the Ponte Sant'Angelo, when there is water in the river. Now since the ragazzi and street urchins of Rome, unlike the gamins of Paris, understand every language, especially French, they heard the traveler ask for rooms, order dinner, and finally inquire as to the address of Thompson in French. The result was that, when the new arrival came out of the hotel with his inevitable guide, a man emerged from the group of onlookers and, without being observed by the traveler, or, apparently, by the guide, walked a short distance behind the foreigner, tailing him with as much skill as a Parisian detective. The man was in such a hurry to visit Thompson in French that he had not bothered to wait for the horses to be harnessed. The carriage was to pick him up on the way or wait for him at the door of the bank. He got there before the coach reached him. The Frenchman went in, leaving his guide in the antechamber, where he immediately got into conversation with 2 or 3 of those businessmen who have no business, or, if you prefer, have 1,000 businesses, who in Rome hang around at the doors of banks, churches, ruins, museums, or theaters. At the same moment, the man who had left the group of onlookers at the hotel also went in. The Frenchman rang at the window in the front office and came through into the first room. His shadow did likewise.
Messrs. Thompson and French, the foreigner asked.
A sort of lackey got up at a sign from a confidential clerk, the solemn guardian of the first office.
Whom should I announce? Asked the lackey, preparing to precede the foreigner. Baron Danglars, the traveler replied. Follow me, said the lackey. A door opened. The lackey and the baron vanished through it.
The man who had come in behind Danglars sat down on a bench to wait.
The clerk went on writing for roughly 5 minutes.
During this time the seated man remained absolutely still and silent. Then the clerk's quill stopped scratching across the paper. He looked up, searched carefully all around him and, after reassuring himself that they were alone, said, "Ah! So there you are, Peppino."
"Yes," the man replied laconically. "Did you see the chance of anything good from that fat man? There's not much to be had out of him, we've been informed." "So you know what he's here for, snooper?" "Why, he's come to make a withdrawal. The only thing is, we don't know how much."
"You'll find out soon enough, my friend."
"Good, but don't do as you did the other day and give me misinformation." "What do you mean? What are you thinking of? Is it the Englishman who went away with 3,000 ekis a few days ago?"
"No, he really did have 3,000 ekis and we found them."
"I'm talking about that Russian prince." "What of him?"
"Well, you told us 30,000 livres and we only found 22.
You probably didn't look hard enough. Luigi Vampa did the search in person."
"In that case, either he had paid his debts, a Russian,
or spent the money."
"I suppose that's possible."
"It's definite."
"But let me go to my post, or the Frenchman will have done his business before I can discover the precise amount." Peppino nodded and, taking a rosary out of his pocket, began to mutter some prayer or other, while the clerk vanished through the same door that had opened for the lackey and the baron. 10 minutes later, he reappeared, with a broad smile.
"Well?" Peppino asked. "Stand by. It's a princely sum. 5 or 6 millions, I believe?" "Yes." "How do you know the figure?" "Against a bill signed by His Excellency, the Count of Monte Cristo." "You know the Count?" "Credited on Rome, Venice, and Vienna."
"Just so," the clerk exclaimed.
"How are you so well informed?" "I told you that we had advance information." "So why did you come to me?"
"To be sure that this is really our man."
"It's him all right. 5 million. A fine sum, eh, Peppino?"
"Yes. We'll never have as much for ourselves." "At least we'll get some crumbs of it," Peppino said philosophically.
"Hush. Here he comes."
The clerk took up his pen and Peppino his rosary. When the door opened, the one was writing and the other praying.
Danglars appeared, in fine spirits, together with the banker, who accompanied him to the door. As agreed, the carriage that was to meet Danglars was waiting in front of the house of Thomson and French. The guide held the door open. A cicerone is a very accommodating creature, who can be put to all sorts of uses. Danglars leapt into the carriage with the spring of a 20-year-old. The guide shut the door and got up beside the driver. Peppino climbed on to the rear box. "Would Your Excellency like to see St. Peter's?" the guide asked. "What for?" the Baron replied. "Why, just to see it." "I didn't come to Rome to see anything," Danglars said aloud. Then, with an avaricious smile, he said under his breath, "I came to touch." And he meaningfully touched his portfolio, in which he had just enclosed a letter. "So, Your Excellency is going to the hotel?" "Casa Pastrini," the guide said to the coachman, and the carriage set off as briskly as a racing gig. 10 minutes later, the Baron had returned to his rooms and Peppino had taken up his place on the bench running along the front of the hotel. After whispering a few words to one of those descendants of Marius and the Gracchi whom we noted at the start of this chapter, the boy in question setting off down the road for the capital as fast as his legs could carry him. Danglars was weary, satisfied and sleepy. He went to bed, put his pocket-book under the bolster and fell asleep. Peppino had plenty of time, however. He played Mora 3 with some porters, lost 3 ecus and in consolation drank a flagon of Orvieto. The next day, Danglars woke late, even though he had gone to bed early. For the previous 5 or 6 nights he had slept badly, if at all. He had an ample breakfast and not being, as he had said, much inclined to enjoy the beauty of the Eternal City, he asked for his post-horses to be brought at noon. However, Danglars had not counted on the formalities of the police and the idleness of the postmaster. The horses arrived only at 2 o'clock and the guide did not bring back the passport, with its visa, until 3. All these preparations had drawn a fair crowd of onlookers to the door of Signor Pastrini's, and there was no lack of descendants of the Gracchi and Marius among them. The Baron walked in triumph through these groups of idlers who called him Excellency, to get a Biacco. Danglars, who was a very democratic fellow as we know, had up to then been content to be addressed as Baron, and had not yet been called Excellency. He found the title flattering and threw a few paws to the mob, which was quite ready, for a further dozen or so of the same, to nominate him Your Royal Highness. "What road?" the postilion asked in Italian. "To Ancona," the Baron replied. Signor Pastrini translated the request and the reply, and the carriage set off at a gallop. Danglars intended to go to Venice and draw out part of his fortune, then from Venice to Vienna, where he would withdraw the rest. Then his idea was to settle in the latter city which, he had been assured, was one offering many pleasures. Hardly had they done 3 leagues through the Roman Campagna than night began to fall. Danglars had not realized that they were leaving so late, otherwise he would have stayed in Rome. He asked the postilion how long it would be before they arrived in the next town. "Non capisco," the man replied. Danglars nodded, to indicate very good, and the carriage drove on. "I can stop at the first post," Danglars thought. He still felt some traces of that well-being which he had experienced on the previous day and which had given him such a good night's sleep. He was comfortably installed in a solid English coach with double springs. He felt himself being pulled forward at a gallop by 2 strong horses, and he knew that the relay was 7 leagues on. What is one to do when one is a banker and one has successfully gone bankrupt? For 10 minutes he thought of his wife, who was still in Paris, and for another 10 minutes he considered his daughter, who was running round the globe with Mlle d'Armilly. He devoted a further 10 minutes to his creditors and how he would spend their money. Then, having nothing left to think about, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. From time to time, however, shaken by a jolt which was harder than the rest, Danglars would momentarily reopen his eyes and feel himself carried along at the same speed through the same Roman Campagna,
among a scattering of broken aqueducts which looked like granite giants petrified as they ran. But the night was cold, dark and rainy, and it was far better for a man who was half asleep to stay at the back of the coach, with his eyes closed, than to put his head out of the door and ask where he was, from a postilion whose only answer would be, "Non capisco." So Danglars went on sleeping, thinking that it would be time enough to wake up when they arrived at the relay. The carriage stopped. Danglars thought he had at last reached his much-desired goal. He opened his eyes and looked through the glass, expecting to find himself in the middle of some town, or at least of some village. But he could see nothing except a kind of isolated hovel, with 3 or 4 men coming and going like shadows. He waited for a moment, expecting the postilion who had finished his relay to come and ask him for his pay. He thought he could take advantage of the opportunity to ask for some information from his new driver. But the horses were unharnessed and replaced without anyone coming to ask the traveler for money. Astonished, Danglars opened the door, but a firm hand immediately slammed it shut, and the carriage set off again. The Baron woke up completely at this, and in some astonishment. "Hey," he called to the postilion. "Hey, mio caro." This was more bel canto Italian that he had learnt when his daughter used to sing duos with Prince Cavalcanti. But mio caro did not reply. So Danglars opened the window. "I say, my good friend." "Where are we going?" he said, putting his head out. "Dentro la testa," cried a serious and commanding voice, accompanied by a threatening gesture. Danglars understood dentro la testa, put your head in. As we can see, he was making rapid progress in Italian. He obeyed, but with some misgivings. And, since his anxiety was increasing minute by minute, after a few moments his mind, instead of the void that it had contained on setting out, which had brought sleep, his mind, as we say, filled with a large quantity of thoughts, each more likely than the previous one to keep a traveler on his toes, especially one finding himself in Danglars' situation. In the darkness his eyes took on that degree of acuity that strong emotions tend to give them at first, only for the effect to be reversed later through overuse. Before one is afraid, one sees clearly, while one is afraid, one sees double, and after being afraid, one sees dimly. Danglars saw a man wrapped in a cloak galloping beside the right-hand door. "Some gendarme," he said. "Have I been denounced to the pontifical authorities by the French telegraph?" He decided to resolve his uncertainties. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "Dentro la testa," the same voice repeated, in the same threatening tone. Danglars looked over at the left-hand door. Another man on horseback was galloping alongside it. "Definitely," said Danglars. "I have definitely been arrested." And he slumped back into the seat, this time not to sleep but to think. A moment later the moon rose. From the back of the carriage he looked out at the countryside and saw the huge aqueducts, stone phantoms which he had noticed in passing, but now, instead of being on his right, they were on the left. He realized that the carriage had turned round and that he was being taken back to Rome. "Oh, wretch that I am," he muttered. "They must have obtained an order for my extradition." The carriage continued to dash forward at a terrifying speed. A dreadful hour went by, because every new indication that appeared proved beyond doubt that the fugitive was being taken back the way he had come. Finally, he saw a dark mass against which it seemed that the carriage was about to crash, but it turned aside and continued parallel to the dark shape, which was nothing other than the ring of ramparts encircling Rome. "Oh, oh," Danglars muttered. "We're not going into the city, so I am not being arrested after all. Good heavens, I've just thought, could it be?" His hair stood on end, because he recalled those interesting stories of Roman bandits which were taken with such a large pinch of salt in Paris. Albert de Morcerf had told some of them to Madame Danglars and Eugénie when it had been a matter of the young Viscount becoming the son-in-law of the first and the husband of the latter.
Perhaps they are thieves, he thought.
Suddenly the carriage was running over something harder than a sanded roadway. Danglars ventured to look out on both sides of the road and saw oddly shaped monuments. Thinking about Morcerf's story, which was now coming back to him in every detail, he thought that he must be on the Appian Way. On the left of the carriage, in a sort of dip, could be seen a circular excavation. It was the Circus of Caracalla. 4. At a word from the man who was galloping by the right-hand door, the carriage stopped.
At the same time the left-hand door opened and a voice ordered, "Scendi." Danglars got down without further ado.
He could still not yet speak Italian, but he was already understanding the language. More dead than alive, he looked around him. He was surrounded by 4 men, apart from the postilion.
"Di qua," one of the 4 said, going down a little path that led from the Appian Way to the middle of the irregular mounds that break up the topography of the Roman Campagna. Danglars followed his guide without debate, and did not need to turn around to confirm that the other 3 men were following him. But it seemed to him that these men were stopping like sentries at more or less equal distances. After they had walked for some 10 minutes, in which Danglars did not exchange a single word with his guide, he found himself standing between a small hillock and a tall bush. 3 silent men standing around him formed a triangle, with himself at its center. He tried to speak, but his tongue refused to obey. "Avanti," said the same sharp and commanding voice. This time Danglars doubly understood. He understood both by word and by gesture, because the man who was walking behind him pushed him forward so roughly that he nearly collided with his guide. The guide was our friend Peppino, who advanced into the high bushes along a winding track that only the ants and the lizards could have recognized as a pathway. Peppino stopped in front of a rock surmounted by a thick bush. This rock, half open like an eyelid, swallowed up the young man, who disappeared into it like a devil into the pit in one of our fairy tales. The voice and gestures of the man behind Danglars ordered him to do the same. There could be no further doubt, the French bankrupt was in the hands of Roman bandits. Danglars did as he was told like a man caught between 2 frightful perils, made brave by fear. Despite his stomach, which was not built for wriggling through cracks in the Roman Campagna, he slipped in behind Peppino and, letting himself drop with his eyes closed, he fell on his feet. As he did so, he reopened his eyes. The track was wide but dark. Peppino, making no effort to conceal himself now that he was at home, struck a flame from a tinder box and lit a torch. 2 other men came down behind Danglars, taking up the rear, and, pushing Danglars if he ever happened to stop, drove him down a gentle slope to the center of a sinister-looking crossroads. Here were white stone walls, hollowed out to make coffins, superimposed one above the other, which seemed like the deep black eyes of a skull. A sentry was tapping the barrel of his carbine against his left hand. "Friend or foe?" he asked. "Friend," said Peppino. "Where is the captain?" "There," the sentry said, indicating over his shoulder a sort of large room hollowed out of the rock, its light shining into the corridor through wide arched openings. "Good pray, Captain, good pray," Peppino said in Italian, seizing Danglars by the collar of his frockcoat and dragging him towards an opening like a door, through which one could gain access to the room in which the captain appeared to have made his lodging. "Is this the man?" he asked, looking up from Plutarch's Life of Alexander, which he had been reading attentively. "That's him, Captain, that's him." "Very well. Show him to me." On this rather impertinent order, Peppino brought his torch so sharply up to Danglars' face that he leapt back, afraid of having his eyelashes burned. His face, pale and distraught, showed all the signs of frightful terror. "This man is tired," the captain said. "Let him be shown to his bed." "Oh," Danglars murmured. "This bed is probably one of the coffins around the walls, and that sleep is the sleep of death that one of the daggers I can see shining in the darkness will bring me."
Indeed, in the black depths of the vast hall, rising off their beds of dry grass or wolf's skin, one could see the companions of the man whom Albert de Morcerf had found reading Caesar's commentaries and whom Danglars found reading the life of Alexander. The banker emitted a dull groan and followed his guide. He did not try either to pray or to cry out. He was without strength, will, power or feeling. He went because he was taken. He tripped against a step and, realizing that there was a stairway in front of him, he bent down instinctively so as not to strike his head and found himself in a cell cut out of the sheer rock. It was clean, if bare, and dry, even though situated in immeasurable depth below the surface of the ground. A bed of dry grass, covered with goatskins, was not standing, but spread out in a corner of this cell. Seeing it, Danglars thought he saw the glowing symbol of his salvation. "Oh, God be praised," he murmured. "It's a real bed." This was the second time in the last hour that he had called on the name of God, something that had not happened to him for 10 years. "Echo," the guide said. And, pushing Danglars into the cell, he shut the door behind him. A bolt grated and Danglars was a prisoner. In any case, even if there had been no lock, it would have taken St. Peter, guided by a heavenly angel, to pass through the midst of the garrison which guarded the catacombs of St. Sebastian, camped around its leader, in whom the reader will surely have recognized the celebrated Luigi Vampa. Danglars had most certainly recognized the bandit, though he had not wanted to believe in the man's existence when Morcerf had tried to introduce him in France. He had recognized not only him but also the cell in which Morcerf had been imprisoned and which, in all probability, was a lodging reserved for foreigners. These memories which, as it happened, Danglars recalled with some joy brought back a feeling of calm. Since they had not killed him at once, the bandits did not intend to kill him at all. They had captured him in order to rob him, and since he had only a few louis on him, he would be ransomed. He recalled that Morcerf had been taxed at around 4,000 écus. As he considered himself a good deal more important than Morcerf, he mentally settled his own price at 8,000 écus. And 8,000 écus was equivalent to 48,000 livres. He would still be left with something in the region of 5,050,000 francs. With that, he could manage anywhere. So, feeling more or less sure that he would survive the adventure, especially since there was no case in which a man had ever been held for a ransom of 5,050,000 livres, Danglars lay down on his bed and, after turning around 2 or 3 times, fell asleep, as easy in his mind as the hero whose story Luigi Vampa was reading. CXV. Luigi Vampa's bill of fare. Every sleep, apart from the one that Danglars feared, ends with an awakening. Danglars woke up. For a Parisian who was accustomed to silk curtains, velvet hangings on the walls and the scent that rises from wood whitening in the chimneypiece or is wafted back from a ceiling lined in satin, to wake up in a chalky stone grotto must be like a dream in the worst possible taste. As he touched the goatskin curtains, Danglars must have thought he was dreaming about the Samoyeds or the Lapps. But in such circumstances it is only a second before the most intractable doubt becomes certainty. Yes, he thought. Yes, I'm in the hands of the bandits about whom Albert de Morcerf was telling us. His first impulse was to breathe, to make sure that he was not wounded. This was something that he had come across in Don Quixote, not perhaps the only book he had read, but the only one of which he could remember something. No, he said. They have not killed me or wounded me, but they may perhaps have robbed me. He quickly felt in his pocket. It had not been touched. The 100 louis that he had put aside for his journey from Rome to Venice were still in his trouser pocket, and the pocketbook with the letter of credit for 5,050,000 francs was still in the pocket of his frock coat. These are strange bandits, he thought, to have left me my purse and my pocketbook. As I said yesterday when I went to bed, they will try to ransom me. Well, well. I still have my watch. Let's see what time it is. Dangler's watch, a masterpiece by Breguet which he had carefully wound up the previous day before setting out, sounded 5:30 in the morning. Without it, Danglars would have had no idea of the time, since there was no daylight in his cell.
Should he ask the bandits to explain themselves? Should he wait patiently until they asked for him? The second alternative seemed the wiser, so Danglars waited. He waited until noon.
Throughout this time a sentry had been stationed at his door. At 8 in the morning, the guard was changed, and at this moment, Danglars felt a desire to find out who was guarding him. He had noticed that rays of light, lamplight, not daylight, were managing to make their way through the ill-fitting planks of the door. He went across to one of these openings just at the moment when the bandit took a few gulps of brandy which, because of the leather bottle that contained it, exuded an odor that Danglars found quite repellent. "Ugh!" he exclaimed, retreating to the far corner of the cell. At noon the man with the brandy was replaced by another operative. Danglars was curious to see his new keeper, so he once more crept over to the gap in the boards. The new man was an athletic bandit, a Goliath with large eyes, thick lips, a broken nose and red hair which hung over his shoulders in twisted locks like vipers.
"Oh, my God!" Danglars said. "This one is more like an ogre than a human being.
In any case, I am old and quite gristly, a fat white, not good to eat."
As we may see, Danglars still had enough wits about him to joke.
At the same moment, as if to prove that he was no ogre, his guard sat down in front of the cell door, took a loaf of black bread out of his haversack, with some onions and cheese, which he forthwith began to devour. "Devil take me," Danglars said, observing the bandit's dinner through the gaps in his door. "Devil take me if I can understand how anyone could eat such filth." He went and sat down on the goatskin, which reminded him of the smell of the first sentry's brandy. However, it was all very well for Danglars to think that, but the secrets of nature are beyond our understanding, and it may be that the crudest of victuals can address a tangible invitation in quite eloquent terms to a hungry stomach. Suddenly Danglars felt that at this moment his was a bottomless pit. The man seemed less ugly, the bread less black and the cheese less rancid. Finally, those raw onions, the repulsive foodstuff of savages, began to evoke certain sauces. Robert won certain dishes of boiled beef and onions which his cook had adapted to more refined palates. When Danglars would tell him, "Monsieur Denisot, give us a spot of plain home cooking today," he got up and went to bang on the door. The bandit looked up. Danglars saw that he had been heard and banged louder. "Che cosa?" the bandit asked. I say, my good fellow," Danglars said, tapping his fingers against the door. "Isn't it about time someone thought of feeding me as well, eh?" But either because he did not understand or because he had no orders regarding Danglars' breakfast, the giant went back to his meal. Danglars' pride was wounded and, not wishing to compromise himself any further with this brute, he lay down once more on the goatskin without uttering another word. 4 hours went by. The giant was replaced by another bandit. Danglars, who was suffering dreadful stomach cramps, quietly got up, put his eye to the door and recognized the intelligent face of his guide. It was indeed Peppino, who was preparing to enjoy his guard duty in as much comfort as possible, sitting down opposite the door and placing between his legs an earthenware casserole which contained some chickpeas tossed in pork fat, hot and redolent. Beside these chickpeas, Peppino set down another pretty little basket of Velletri grapes and a flask of Orvieto wine. Peppino was something of a gourmet. Danglars' mouth began to water as he watched these gastronomic preparations. "Ah, ha," he thought. "Let's see if this one is any more amenable than the last." And he hammered gently on his door. "On YVA," the bandit said. Thanks to his association with Signor Pastrini's house, he had eventually learned even idiomatic French, so he came and opened the door. Danglars recognized him as the man who had shouted at him in such an enraged tone, "Put your head in." However, this was no time for recriminations. On the contrary, he adopted his most pleasant manner and said, with a gracious smile, "I beg your pardon, monsieur, but am I not also to be given some dinner?" "What?" Peppino exclaimed. "Is your excellency hungry, by any chance?" I like that, by any chance, Danglars thought. It is now fully 24 hours since I last ate anything. And he added aloud, shrugging his shoulders, "Yes, I am hungry, in fact, very hungry." "So would your excellency like to eat?" "Immediately, if possible." "Nothing simpler," said Peppino. "Here one can get whatever one wishes, if one pays, of course, as is customary among honest Christians." "Of course," said Danglars. "Though the fact is that people who arrest you and throw you in jail should at least feed their prisoners." "Oh, excellency," Peppino replied, "that's not customary." "That's no argument," Danglars said, hoping to tame his keeper with his good humor. "But I shall have to make do with it. Now then, let me have something to eat." "At once, excellency." "What is your pleasure?" And Peppino put his bowl on the ground so that the fumes found their way directly into Danglars' nostrils. "Give me your order." "Do you have kitchens here, then?" the banker asked. "What? Do we have kitchens?" "The finest kitchens." "And cooks?" "Superb cooks." "Well, then, fowl, fish, or flesh, anything, as long as I can eat." "As your excellency pleases. Shall we say a chicken?" "Yes, a chicken." Peppino drew himself up and cried as loudly as he could, "A chicken for his excellency." His voice was still echoing under the vaults when a young man appeared, handsome, slim and half naked, like a fish porter in antiquity. He bore in the chicken on a silver plate, balancing it on his head. "This is just like the Café de Paris," Danglars muttered. "Here we are, excellency," Peppino said, taking the chicken from the young bandit and putting it down on a worm-eaten table which, with a stool and the goatskin bed, made up the entire furniture of the cell. Danglars asked for a knife and fork. "There you are, excellency," Peppino said, offering him a little knife with a rounded end and a boxwood fork. Danglars took the knife in one hand and the fork in the other, and set to work cutting up the piece of poultry. "Excuse me, excellency," Peppino said, putting a hand on the banker's shoulder. "Here we pay before eating, the customer may not be happy when he leaves." "Oh, I see," thought Danglars. "It's not like in Paris, quite apart from the fact that they are probably going to fleece me, but let's do things in style. Come now, I've always been told how cheap it is living in Italy. A chicken must be worth some 12 sous in Rome." "Here you are," he said, throwing a louis to Peppino. Peppino picked up the louis, and Danglars again put the knife on the bird. "One moment, excellency," said Peppino, getting up. "Your excellency still owes me something." "Didn't I say they would fleece me?" Danglars muttered. But, resolving to make the best of this extortion, he asked, "So, how much do I still owe you for this skinny old boiler?" "Your excellency has given me a louis on account." "A louis, on account, for a chicken?" "Yes, indeed." "Come, you're joking." "That leaves only 4,999 louis that your excellency still owes me." Danglars stared wide-eyed at the announcement of this enormous pleasantry. "Oh, very funny," he muttered. "Very funny indeed." He was about to go back to cutting up the chicken, but Peppino grasped his right hand with his own left hand, while holding out the other. "Come," he said. "You're not joking?" Danglars asked. "We never joke, excellency," said Peppino, as serious as a Quaker. "What? 100,000 francs for this chicken?" "Excellency, you wouldn't believe how hard it is to raise poultry in these confounded caves."
Come, said Danglars. I find this very entertaining. Very amusing, I must say. But, as I'm hungry, let me eat.
Here, there's another Louis for yourself, my friend.
Then that will be only 4,998 Louis, Peppino said, with unaltered equanimity. If we are patient, we'll get there in the end.
Now, see here, said Danglars, disgusted by this persistent determination to make fun of him. As far as that goes, never.
Go to hell. You don't know the person you're dealing with.
Peppino made a sign, and the young boy reached out and snatched away the chicken. Danglars threw himself back on the goatskin bed and Peppino shut the door, then went back to eating his chickpeas. Danglars could not see what Peppino was doing, but the clatter of the bandit's teeth left the prisoner in no doubt as to the nature of the exercise he was engaged in. It was quite clear that he was eating, and even that he was eating very noisily, like a badly brought-up young man.
Brute! Danglars said. Peppino pretended not to hear.
Without even turning around, he went on eating at a very sensible pace.
Danglars' stomach seemed to have as many holes in it as the barrel of the Danaid's .2. He couldn't believe that he would ever manage to fill it. However, he lasted for another half hour, though it is true to say that that half hour seemed to him like a century. Then he got up again and went to the door. Come, monsieur, he said. Don't keep me on tenterhooks like this any longer. Just tell me straight away what you want of me. But, Excellency, why not rather say what you want of us? Give us your orders and we shall carry them out. Well, first, open the door. Peppino opened it. Danglars said, by God, I want to eat. You're hungry? As you very well know. What would your Excellency like to eat? A piece of dry bread, since chicken is priceless in these accursed caves. Bread. Very well, said Peppino. And he called out, Ho, there, bring some bread. A young boy brought a roll. There you are, said Peppino. How much? Danglars asked. 4,998 Louis, you have 2 Louis's credit. What? A bread roll is 100,000 francs? 100,000, said Peppino. But you asked me the same price for a chicken. We don't offer an à la carte menu, only prix fixe. Whether you eat a lot or a little, ask for 10 dishes or just one, it's still the same amount. This joke again. My good friend, I tell you, this is absurd, it's ridiculous. Why not tell me at once that you want me to die of starvation? It would be quicker. No, Excellency. You are the one who wants to commit suicide. Pay up and eat up. What can I pay with, you frightful creature? Danglars said in exasperation. Do you think I carry 100,000 francs around in my pocket? You have 5,050,000 francs in your pocket, Excellency, said Peppino. That is 100 chickens at 100,000 francs and half a chicken at 50,000. Danglars shuddered and the scales fell from his eyes. It was still a joke, but he understood it at last. It is even true to say that he found it more piquant than he had a moment before. Come, now, he said. If I give you those 100,000 francs, will you at least consider us quits and let me eat in peace? Of course, said Peppino. But how can I give them to you? Danglars asked, breathing more freely. Nothing could be easier. You have a credit with Messrs. Thomson and French, via des Banchis, in Rome. Give us a bill for 4,998 Louis on those gentlemen, and our banker will cash it for us. Danglars at least wanted to show willing. He took the pen and paper which Peppino offered him, wrote out the order and signed it.
There, he said. That's a bill, payable to bearer.
And that's your chicken. Danglars cut into the fowl with a sigh.
It seemed to him very thin for such a large sum of money. As for Peppino, he read the paper carefully, put it in his pocket and went on eating his chickpeas.
CXVI. The Pardon.
The next day, Danglars was hungry again. The air of this cave was decidedly stimulating to the appetite, but the prisoner thought that today he would have no further expense. Being a thrifty man, he had hidden half of his chicken and a piece of his bread in the corner of the cell.
But no sooner had he eaten them than he was thirsty.
He had not thought of that. He struggled against his thirst until he felt his parched tongue sticking to his palate. Then, unable to resist the fire devouring him, he called out. The sentry opened the door. It was a new face. Danglars felt that it would be better to deal with a more familiar one and called for Peppino. Here I am, Excellency, the bandit said, arriving promptly, which seemed a good omen to the banker. What would you like?
Something to drink, the prisoner said.
Excellency, you know that wine is ridiculously expensive in the region around Rome.
Then give me water, said Danglars, trying to parry the blow.
Oh, Excellency, water is even scarcer than wine.
The drought has been so bad.
I see, said Danglars. It appears that we are going to start that again. Though he was smiling, to give the impression that he was joking, the wretch felt sweat beading on his forehead. Now, friend, he continued, when Peppino made no response.
I'm asking you for a glass of wine. Will you refuse me?
I've already told your Excellency that we don't sell retail or by the glass, said Peppino. Very well, give me a bottle.
Of which?
The cheaper. They are both the same price.
Which is? 25,000 francs a bottle.
Tell me, said Danglars, with a bitterness that only Harpagon one could have noted on the scale of the human voice, tell me that you want to skin me alive. It would be quicker than devouring me piecemeal.
Perhaps that is what the master intends, said Peppino.
Who is the master?
The one to whom you were taken the day before yesterday. And where is he?
Here.
Let me see him.
That's easy.
A moment later, Luigi Vampa was standing in front of Danglars.
Did you call for me? He asked his prisoner.
Are you the leader of those who brought me here, monsieur?
Yes, Excellency.
What ransom do you want from me? Tell me.
Just the 5 million you have on you. Danglars felt a dreadful shudder run through his heart. That is all I have in the world, monsieur, he said, and the remains of a vast fortune. If you take that away from me, take my life. We have been forbidden to shed your blood, Excellency.
By whom?
By the person whom we obey.
So you do obey somebody?
Yes, a leader. I thought that you yourself were the leader. I am the leader of these men, but another is my leader.
And does this leader obey anyone?
Yes.
Whom?
God.
Danglars thought for a moment.
I don't understand, he said.
Possibly. Did the leader tell you to treat me in this way?
Yes.
Why? I don't know. But my money will run out.
Probably.
Come, said Danglars. Would you like 1 million?
No.
2? No. 3 million?
4?
Come now, 4 million? I'll give it to you on condition you let me go.
"Why do you offer us 4 million for something that is worth 5, said Vampa.
That's usury, senior banker, if I'm not mistaken.
Take it all. Take it all, I say,
Danglars said. And kill me.
Come, Excellency, calm yourself.
You will whip up your blood, and that will give you an appetite to eat 1 million a day. Be more economical, please. But when I have no more money to pay you, Danglars said in exasperation. Then you'll go hungry.
Go hungry, said Danglars, turning pale.
Quite probably, said Vampa with admirable equanimity.
But you said you did not wish to kill me?
No.
Yet you do want to let me starve to death?
That's different.
Well, you wretches, Danglars cried, I shall foil your vile schemes. If I have to die, I should rather get it over at once. Make me suffer, torture me, kill me, but you shall not have my signature again. As you wish, Excellency, said Vampa. And he left the cell. With a roar of frustration, Danglars threw himself down on his goatskin.
Who were these men? Who was their invisible leader? What plan were they carrying out against him? And when everyone else was able to buy freedom, why could he not do the same?
Oh, certainly, death, sudden and violent, was a good way to foil his implacable enemies, who seemed to be pursuing him with some incomprehensible desire for vengeance.
Yes, but that meant dying.
Perhaps for the first time in his long career, Danglars thought of death with a simultaneous desire and a fear of dying. The moment had come for him to look directly at the implacable specter which hovers over every living creature and which, at every heartbeat, says to itself, "You will die." Danglars was like one of those wild animals that at first are excited by the hunt, then are driven to desperation and which sometimes, in their very desperation, manage to escape. It was of escape that Danglars was thinking. But the walls were solid rock and in front of the only entrance to the cell a man was reading. Behind him could be seen the shapes of others with rifles, passing back and forth. His determination not to sign lasted for 2 days, after which he asked for food and offered 1 million. He was served a magnificent dinner and they took his 1 million. From then on the unfortunate prisoner's life was one of continual rambling. He had suffered so much that he no longer wished to expose himself to suffering and he gave in to every demand. After 12 days, one afternoon when he had just eaten as he used to in the days when he had been rich, he did his accounts and discovered that he had signed so many bills to bearer that he had only 50,000 francs left.
His reaction to this discovery was an odd one.
Having just given up 5 million, he tried to save these last 50,000 francs. Rather than give up his 50,000 francs, he resolved to suffer a life of privation. He had glimmers of hope that were close to madness. Having long forgotten God, he recalled only that God had sometimes performed miracles, that the cave might collapse, that the pontifical carabinieri might discover this accursed retreat and come to his aid, that then he would have 50,000 francs left and that this was enough to prevent a man dying of hunger. He begged God to let him keep these 50,000 francs and, as he prayed, he wept. 3 days passed in which the name of God was constantly, if not in his heart, at least on his lips. From time to time he had moments of delirium in which he thought he could see, through the window, a miserable room in which an old man lay, dying, on a straw pallet. The old man too was dying of starvation. On the 4th day he was no longer a man but a living corpse. He had grubbed up from the earth the smallest crumb from his previous meals and began to devour the matting which covered the earth. Then he begged Peppino, as one might beg a guardian angel, to give him some food. He offered him 1,000 francs for a mouthful of bread, but Peppino did not answer. On the 5th day, he dragged himself to the door of the cell. "Aren't you a Christian?" he said, hauling himself to his knees. "Do you wish to murder a man who is your brother before God?" "Oh, my former friends," he muttered. And he fell
face down, on the ground. Then, raising himself with a sort of despair, he cried, "The leader! The leader!" "Here I am," said Vampa, suddenly appearing. "What do you want now?" "Take the last of my gold," Danglars stammered, offering his pocketbook. "And let me live here, in this cave. I am not asking for freedom, I am only asking to live." "So are you really suffering?" Vampa asked. "Oh, yes. I am suffering, cruelly. But there are men who have suffered more than you have. I cannot believe it. It is so. Those who died of hunger." Danglars thought of the old man whom he had seen through the windows of his mean room in his hallucinations, groaning on his bed. He beat his forehead against the ground, moaning, "It's true, there are those who have suffered more than I do, but they at least were martyrs." "Do you at least repent?" asked a dark and solemn voice which made the hair stand up on Danglars' head. His weakened eyes tried to make out things in the darkness, and behind the bandit he saw a man wrapped in a cloak and half hidden by the shadow of a stone pillar. "Of what must I repent?" Danglars stammered. "Of the evil you have done," said the same voice. "Oh, yes, I do repent. I do," Danglars cried, and he beat his breast with his emaciated fist. "Then I pardon you," said the man, throwing aside his cloak and taking a step into the light. "The Count of Monte Cristo," Danglars said, terror making him more pale than he had been a moment before from hunger and misery. "You are mistaken. I am not the Count of Monte Cristo." "Who are you then?" "I am the one whom you sold, betrayed and dishonored. I am the one whose fiancée you prostituted. I am the one on whom you trampled in order to attain a fortune. I am the one whose father you condemned to starvation, and the one who condemned you to starvation, but who nonetheless forgives you, because he himself needs forgiveness. I am Edmond Dantès." Danglars gave a single cry and fell, prostrate. "Get up," said the Count. "Your life is safe. The same good fortune did not attend your two accomplices, one is mad, the other is dead. Keep your last 50,000 francs, I give them to you. As for the 5 million you stole from the almshouses, they have already been returned by an anonymous donor. Now, eat and drink. This evening you are my guest. Vampa, when this man has had his fill, he will be free." Danglars remained prostrate, while the Count walked away. When he looked up, he saw only a sort of shadow disappearing down the corridor, while the bandits bowed as it passed. As the Count had ordered, Vampa served Danglars. He brought him the best wine and finest fruits of Italy and, having put him into his postchaise, left him on the road, with his back to a tree. He stayed there until dawn, not knowing where he was. When day broke, he found that he was near a stream. He was thirsty, so he dragged himself over to it. Leaning over the water to drink, he observed that his hair had turned gray. CXVII. October the 5th. It was around 6 in the evening, and light the color of opal, pierced by the golden rays of the autumn sun, spread over a bluish sea. The heat of the day had gradually expired and one was starting to feel that light breeze which seems like the breath of nature awaking after the burning midday siesta, that delicious breath that cools the Mediterranean coast and carries the scent of trees from shore to shore, mingled with the acrid scent of the sea. Over the huge lake that extends from Gibraltar to the Dardanelles and from Tunis to Venice, a light yacht, cleanly and elegantly shaped, was slipping through the first mists of evening. Its movement was that of a swan opening its wings to the wind and appearing to glide across the water. At once swift and graceful, it advanced, leaving behind a phosphorescent wake. Bit by bit, the sun, whose last rays we were describing, fell below the western horizon, but, as though confirming the brilliant fantasies of mythology, its prying flames reappeared at the crest of every wave as if to reveal that the god of fire had just hidden his face in the bosom of Amphitrite,
who tried in vain to hide her lover in the folds of her azure robe. Though there was apparently not enough wind to lift the ringlets on a girl's head, the yacht was traveling fast. Standing in its bow, a tall, bronzed man was staring wide-eyed at the dark, conical mass of land rising from the midst of the waves like a Catalan hat. "Is that Monte Cristo?" asked the traveler, who appeared to be in command of the yacht, in a grave and melancholy voice.
"Yes, Excellency," said the master. "We are just reaching the end of our journey."
"The end of our journey," the traveler muttered, with an indefinable note of dejection. Then he added under his breath, "Yes, this is port." And he relapsed into thoughts that expressed themselves in a smile sadder than tears. A few minutes later he saw an onshore light that was immediately extinguished, and the sound of a gunshot reached the yacht. "Excellency," the master said, "that is the signal from on shore."
"Would you like to reply?" "What signal?" he asked.
The master pointed towards the island, from the side of which a single whitish plume of smoke was rising, spreading, and breaking up as it mounted into the sky. "Oh, yes," the traveler said, as if waking from a dream.
"Give it to me." The master offered him a ready-loaded carbine.
He took it, slowly raised it and fired into the air. 10 minutes later they were furling the sails and dropping anchor 500 yards outside a little port. The boat was already in the sea, with 4 oarsmen and a pilot. The traveler got in, but instead of sitting in the prow, which was furnished with a blue carpet, he remained standing with his arms crossed. The oarsmen waited, with their oars poised above the water, like birds drying their wings.
"Go," said the traveler.
The 8 oars dipped into the sea simultaneously without a single splash, and the boat, driven forward, began to glide rapidly across the water. In no time they were in a small bay, formed by a natural fold in the rock.
The boat grated on a fine sandy bottom.
"Excellency," the pilot said, "climb on the shoulders of 2 of our men, they will take you ashore." The young man replied to the invitation with a gesture of complete indifference, put his legs over the side of the boat and slid into the water, which came up to his waist.
"Oh, Excellency," the pilot muttered, "you are wrong to do that. The master will tell us off."
The young man continued to plow forward towards the shore, following 2 sailors who chose the best route. After 30 paces they had landed. He shook his feet on dry land and looked around for the path that he would probably be told to follow, because it was quite dark. Just as he was turning his head, a hand rested on his shoulder and he shuddered at hearing a voice say, "Good day, Maximilian."
"You are punctual. Thank you."
"It's you, Count," the young man exclaimed, with a movement which could have been one of joy, grasping Monte Cristo's hand in both of his.
"Yes, as you see, as punctual as you. But you are soaking wet, my dear fellow."
"You must get changed, as Calypso used to say to Telemachus. "1 Come, I've got rooms all ready for you where you can forget tiredness and cold." Monte Cristo saw that Morrel was looking around. He waited. Indeed, the young man was surprised that he had not heard a word from those who had brought him. He had not paid them, and yet they had left. He could even hear the plashing of the oars on the little boat taking them back to the yacht.
"Ah, you're looking for your sailors," said the Count.
"Yes, of course.
They left without me giving them anything." "Don't bother about that, Maximilian," Monte Cristo said with a laugh. "I have a deal with the Navy, so that there is no charge for passage to my island. I'm an account customer, as they say in civilized countries." Morrel looked at him with astonishment. "Count," he said, "you are not the same as you were in Paris." "In what way?"
"Why, here you laugh."
Monte Cristo's brow clouded immediately.
"You are right to recall me to myself," he said.
"Seeing you again was a pleasure for me, and I forgot that every pleasure is transitory." "Oh, no, Count.
Moral exclaimed, once more grasping his friend's hand with both of his. Please do laugh. Be happy and prove to me by your indifference that life is only a burden for those who suffer. Oh, you are generous, you are kind, you are good, my friend, and you pretend to be happy only to give me strength. You are wrong, Moral, said Monte Cristo. I really was happy. Then you have forgotten me. So much the better. What do you mean? Because you know, my dear friend, I say to you, as the gladiator would say to the sublime emperor on entering the arena, those who are about to die salute you. You are not consoled, then? Monte Cristo asked, with a strange look. Oh, did you really think I could be? Moral answered, with one full of reproach. Listen, the Count said, and listen carefully to what I am about to say. You don't think I am some vulgar babbler, a rattle that gives out a crude and meaningless sound. When I asked you if you were consoled, I was speaking to you as a man for whom the human heart holds no secrets. Well, then, Moral, let us sound the depths of your heart. Is it still that ardent impatience of pain that makes the body leap like a lion bitten by a mosquito? Is it still that raging thirst that can be sated only in the tomb? Is it that ideal notion of regret that launches the living man out of life in pursuit of death? Or is it merely the prostration of exhausted courage, the ennui that stifles the ray of hope as it tries to shine? Is it the loss of memory, bringing an impotence of tears? Oh, my friend, if it is that, if you can no longer weep, if you think your numbed heart is dead, if you have no strength left except in God and no eyes except for heaven, then, my friend, let us put aside words that are too narrow to contain the meanings our soul would give them. Maximilian, you are consoled. Pity yourself no longer. Count, Moral said, in a voice that was at once soft and firm. Count, listen to me, as you would listen to a man pointing towards the earth and with his eyes raised to heaven. I came here to join you so that I might die in the arms of a friend. Admittedly, there are those whom I love my sister Julie, I love her husband, Emmanuel. But I need someone to open strong arms to me and smile at my last moments. My sister would burst into tears and faint, I should see her suffer and I have suffered enough. Emmanuel would seize the weapon from my hands and fill the house with his cries. You, Count, have given me your word. You are more than a man, I should call you a god if you were not mortal. You will lead me gently and tenderly, I know, to the gates of death. My friend, said the Count, I have one lingering doubt. Will you be so weak as to pride yourself on the exhibition of your grief? No, I am a plain man, Moral said, offering the Count his hand. See, my pulse is not beating any faster or slower than usual. No, I feel I am at the end of the road, I shall go no further. You told me to wait and hope. Do you know what you have done, wise as you are? I have waited a month, which means I have suffered a month. I hoped, man is such a poor and miserable creature, I hoped, for what? I don't know, something unimaginable, absurd, senseless, a miracle, but what? God alone knows, for it was He who deluded our reason with that madness called hope. Yes, I waited, yes, Count, I hoped, and in the past quarter of an hour, while we have been speaking, you have unwittingly broken and tortured my heart 100 times, for each of your words proved to me that I have no hope left. Oh, Count! Let me rest in the sweet and voluptuous bosom of death. Moral spoke the last words with an explosion of energy that made the Count shudder. My friend, he continued, when the Count did not reply, you named October the 5th as the end of the reprieve that you asked me to accept. And, my friend, this is the 5th. Moral took out his watch. It is 9 o'clock. I have 3 hours left to live. Very well, Monte Cristo replied. Come with me. Moral followed mechanically, and they were already in the grotto before Moral had realized it. He found carpets under his feet. A door opened, he was enveloped in perfumes and a bright light dazzled him. He stopped,
reluctant to go on.
He was wary of being weakened by the delights around him.
Monte Cristo pulled him gently forward.
"Is it not appropriate," he said, "for us to spend the 3 hours we have left like those ancient Romans who, when they were condemned to death by Nero, their emperor and their heir, would sit at a table decked with flowers and breathe in death with the scent of heliotropes and roses?"
Moral smiled and said, "As you wish. Death is still death, that is to say forgetfulness, rest, the absence of life and so the absence of pain."
He sat down and Monte Cristo took his place in front of him. They were in the wonderful dining room that we have already described, where marble statues carried baskets full of fruit and flowers on their heads. Moral had looked vaguely at all this, and had probably seen nothing of it. "Let's speak man to man," he said, staring hard at the Count.
"Go on," the latter replied.
"Count, you are an encyclopedia of all human knowledge, and you strike me as someone who has come down from a more advanced and wiser world than our own."
"There is some truth in that, Moral," the Count said with a melancholy smile that transfigured his face. "I have come from a planet called Sorrow."
"I believe whatever you tell me, without trying to elucidate its meaning, Count.
The proof is that you told me to live, and I have lived. You told me to hope, and I almost hoped.
So I shall dare to ask you, as if you had already died once before, Count, does it hurt very much?"
Monte Cristo looked at Moral with an infinite expression of tenderness.
"Yes," he said. "Yes, no doubt, it does hurt, if you brutally shatter the mortal envelope when it is crying out to live. If you make your flesh scream under the imperceptible teeth of a dagger, if you drive an insensitive bullet, always ready to meander on its way, through your brain, which suffers from the merest jolt, yes, indeed, you will suffer and leave life in the most horrifying way, in a desperate agony that will make you ready to think it better than rest bought at such a price."
"I understand," said Moral.
"Death has its secrets of pain and pleasure, like life, it is just a question of knowing what they are."
"Precisely, Maximilian, you have hit the nail on the head.
Death, according to the care we take to be on good or bad terms with it, is either a friend which will rock us as gently as a nursing mother or an enemy which will savagely tear apart body and soul. One day, when our world has lived another 1,000 years, when people have mastered all the destructive forces of nature and harnessed them to the general good of mankind, and when, as you just said, men have learnt the secrets of death, then death will be as sweet and voluptuous as sleep in a lover's arms."
"And you, Count, if you wanted to die, would you know how to die in that way?" "I should."
Moral reached out his hand. "Now I understand," he said, "why you have brought me here to this desolate island, in the midst of the ocean, to this subterranean palace, a tomb that a pharaoh would envy."
"It was because you love me, wasn't it, Count?
You love me enough to give me one of those deaths that you spoke of just now, a death without agony, a death that will allow me to expire with Valentine's name on my lips and your hand in mine?"
"You are right, Moral," the Count said, simply. "That's how I see it. Thank you.
The idea that tomorrow I shall no longer suffer is like balm to my heart."
"Is there nothing you will miss?" Monte Cristo asked.
"No," Moral replied. "Not even me?" the Count asked, with deep feeling. Moral stopped, his clear eye suddenly clouded, then shone with even greater brilliance. A large tear rolled from it and left a silver trace across his cheek. "What?" the Count exclaimed.
"There is something you will regret leaving on earth, yet you want to die."
"Oh, I beg you," Moral cried in a weak voice. "Not a word, Count, do not prolong my agony." The Count feared that Moral was weakening, and this belief momentarily revived the terrible doubt that had already once struck him in the Château d'If. "I am engaged in giving this man back his happiness," he thought. "I consider that restitution is a weight thrown back into the scales in the opposite tray from the one where I cast evil.
Now, suppose I am wrong and this man is not unhappy enough to deserve happiness.
Alas, what would happen to me, I,
who am unable to atone for evil except by doing good. Listen to me, moral, he said. Your grief is immense, I can see that, but you believe in God, perhaps you do not wish to risk the salvation of your soul? Moral smiled sadly. Count, he said, you know that I do not exaggerate, but, I swear, my soul is no longer my own. Listen, moral, the Count said. I have no living relative, as you know. I have grown accustomed to thinking of you as my son. Well, to save my son, I would sacrifice my life and, even more readily, my fortune. What do you mean? I mean, moral, that you want to leave life because you do not know all the pleasures that life gives to the very rich. Moral, I possess nearly 100 million, you can have it. With that much money you could achieve anything you desire. Are you ambitious? Every career is open to you. Stir up the world, change it, commit any kind of folly, be a criminal if you must, but live. Count, I have your word, the young man replied coldly. And, he added, taking out his watch, it is 11:30. Could you do such a thing, moral, in my house, before my eyes? Then let me leave, Maximilian said, his face clouding. Or I shall think you don't love me for myself, but for you. And he got up. Very well, then, said Monte Cristo, his face lightening at these words. You want it, moral, and you are immovable. Yes, you are profoundly unhappy and, as you said, only a miracle could cure you. Sit down, and wait. The young man obeyed. Monte Cristo got up in his turn and went to open a carefully locked cupboard, the key to which he wore on a gold chain. He took out a little silver casket, magnificently sculpted and modeled with 4 arched figures at the 4 corners, like pining caryatids, shaped like women, symbols of angels reaching for heaven. He put the casket down on the table, then opened it, taking out a little gold box, the lid of which was raised by pressure on a hidden spring. This box contained a half-congealed, oily substance, its color indefinable because of the shining gold and the sapphires, rubies and emeralds encrusting it. It was like a shimmering mass of blue, purple and gold. The Count took a small quantity of the substance on an enameled spoon and offered it to Morel, fixing his eyes on him. Only now could it be seen that the substance was green in color. "This is what you asked me for," he said. "This is what I promised you." "While I still have life," the young man said, taking the spoon from Monte Cristo's hands, "I thank you from the bottom of my heart." The Count took a second spoon and dipped once more into the gold box. "What are you doing, my dear friend?" Morel asked, grasping his hand. "Why, Morel," the other said, with a smile. "God forgive me, but I think that I am as weary of life as you are, and while the opportunity presents itself." "Stop," the young man cried. "Oh, you who love and are loved, you who can trust in hope, oh, don't you do what I am about to do. For you, it would be a crime. Farewell, my noble and generous friend. I shall tell Valentine all that you have done for me." And slowly, without any more hesitation than a pressure on the left hand which he was holding out to the Count, Morel swallowed, or, rather, savored, the mysterious substance that Monte Cristo had offered him. Then both men fell silent. Ali, noiseless and attentive, brought tobacco and pipes, served coffee, and then vanished. Little by little the lamps paled in the hands of the marble statues holding them, and the perfume from the censers seemed less pervasive to Morel. Opposite him, Monte Cristo was watching him through the dark, and he could see nothing except the burning of the Count's eyes. The young man was overwhelmed with an immense pain. He felt the hookah fall from his hands, and the objects around him gradually lost their shape and color. His clouded eyes seemed to see doors and curtains opening in the walls. "My friend," he said, "I feel I am dying." "Thank you." He made one last effort to hold out his hand, but it fell, powerless, beside him. And now it seemed to him that Monte Cristo was smiling, no longer with that strange and terrifying smile that had several times allowed him to glimpse the mysteries of that profound soul, but with the tender compassion of a father towards the follies of his child. At the same time, the Count was growing before his eyes. His figure almost doubled in size, outlined against the red hangings. He had thrown back his black hair and stood proudly like one of those avenging angels with which the wicked are threatened on Judgment Day. Moral, beaten, overwhelmed, slumped back in his chair. A silky torpor filled his every vein. His mind was refurnished, as it were, by a change of thoughts, just like a new pattern appearing in a kaleidoscope. Lying back, panting, excited, he felt nothing more living in him apart from this dream. He seemed to be plunging directly into the vague delirium that precedes that other unknown, called death. Once again he tried to reach out to take the Count's hand, but this time his own would not even budge. He tried to utter a last goodbye, but his tongue turned heavily in his mouth, like a stone blocking the entrance to a sepulchre. Hard as he tried, he could not keep his languid eyes open, yet behind their lids there was an image that he recognized despite the darkness which he felt had enveloped him. It was the Count, who had just opened the door. At once, an immense burst of light flooded from an adjoining room, or, rather, a wonderful palace, into the room where Morrel was abandoning himself to his gentle death throes. And then, on the threshold of that other chamber, between the two rooms, he saw a woman of miraculous beauty. Pale and sweetly smiling, she seemed like an angel of mercy casting out the angel of vengeance. "Is heaven already opening its gate to me?" thought the dying man. "This angel is like the one I lost." Monte Cristo pointed the young woman to the sofa where Morrel was lying, and she stepped forward with her hands clasped and smiling lips. "Valentine! Valentine!" Morrel cried, in the depths of his soul. But his throat did not utter a sound and, as though all his strength had been concentrated on that inner feeling, he gave a sigh and closed his eyes. Valentine dashed forward. Morrel's lips moved again. "He is calling you," said the Count. "He is calling you from the depth of his sleep, the man to whom you have entrusted your fate and from whom death tried to separate you, but fortunately I was there and I overcame death. Valentine, from now on you must never be separated on this earth because, to rejoin you, he would leap into his grave. Without me, you would both have died. I give you back to one another, may God credit me with these 2 lives that I have saved." Valentine clasped Monte Cristo by the hand and, with an irresistible burst of joy, put it to her lips. "Yes, yes," he said. "Thank me. Oh, tell me over and over again, never tire of telling me that I have made you happy. You do not know how much I need the certainty of that." "Oh, yes, I thank you with all my soul," Valentine said. "And if you doubt the sincerity of my thanks, ask Haydée, ask my dear sister Haydée, who has made me wait patiently since our departure from France, talking to me of you, until this happy day that has now dawned." "Do you love Haydée?" Monte Cristo asked, with ill-disguised emotion. "Oh, yes, with all my heart." "Then, Valentine, listen to me," said the Count. "I have a favor to beg of you." "Of me? Good heavens, am I fortunate enough for that?" "You called Haydée your sister. Let her be your sister indeed, Valentine. Give her everything that you think you owe to me. Protect her, you and Morrel, because," and here the Count's voice was almost stifled in his throat, "because from now on she will be alone in the world." "Alone in the world," repeated a voice from behind the place where the Count was standing. "Why?" Monte Cristo turned and saw Haydée, pale and ice-cold, giving him a look of utter disbelief. "Because tomorrow, my child, you will be free," he replied. "Because you will resume your proper place in the world and because I do not want my fate to cloud your own. You are the daughter of a prince, I am restoring your father's wealth and your father's name to you." Haydée's face was drained of color.
She opened her translucent hands like a virgin recommending her soul to God, and said, in a voice harsh with tears, "So, my lord, you are leaving me? Haiti, you are young and beautiful. Forget even my name, and be happy." "Very well," said Haiti. "Your orders will be carried out, my lord. I shall forget even your name, and I shall be happy." And she took a pace backwards to leave the room. "Oh, my God," cried Valentine, who was supporting Morel's numbed head on her shoulder. "Can't you see how pale she is? Don't you realize what she is suffering?" Haiti addressed her with a heartrending expression on her face. "How do you expect him to understand me, my sister? He is my master, and I his slave. He has the right to see nothing." The Count shuddered at the tone of this voice, which awoke the deepest fibers of his being. His eyes met those of the young woman and could not bear to look into them. My God," he said. "Can what you hinted to me be true? Haiti, would you be happy then not to leave me?" "I am young," she answered softly. "I love life, which you have always made so pleasant for me. I should be sorry to die." "Do you mean that if I were to leave you, Haiti?" "Yes, my lord, I should die." "Do you love me, then?" "Oh, Valentine, he asks if I love him. Tell him, do you love Maximilian?" The Count felt his breast swell and his heart fell. He opened his arms and Haiti threw herself into them with a cry. "Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I love you," she said. "I love you as one loves a father, a brother, a husband. I love you as one loves life, and loves God, for you are to me the most beautiful, the best and greatest of created beings." "Let it be as you will, my sweet angel," said the Count. "God, who roused me against my enemies and gave me victory, God, I can see, does not wish my victory to end with that regret. I wish to punish myself, but God wants to pardon me. So, love me, Haiti. Who knows? Perhaps your love will make me forget what I have to forget." "What are you saying, my lord?" the young woman asked. "I am saying that a word from you, Haiti, enlightened me more than 20 years of sage wisdom. I have only you left in the world, Haiti. It is through you that I am attached to life, through you I can suffer and through you I can be happy." "Do you hear that, Valentine?" Haiti cried. "He says that through me he can suffer. Through me, when I would give my life for him." The Count thought for a moment. "Have I understood the truth? Oh, God! What matter? Reward or punishment, I accept my fate. Come, Haiti, come," and putting his arm round the young woman's waist, he pressed Valentine's hand and disappeared. About an hour passed in which, breathing heavily and staring, unable to speak, Valentine remained by Morel's side. Finally she felt his heartbeat, a barely perceptible breath passed his lips and the young man's whole body was shaken by that slight shudder which indicates returning life. Finally his eyes opened, though at first they stared wildly. Then sight returned, sharp and true, and, with it, feeling, and, with feeling, pain. "Oh," he wailed in a desperate voice. "I am still alive. The Count deceived me." And his hand reached for a knife on the table. "My friend," said Valentine, with her irresistible smile, "wake up and look towards me." Morel gave a great cry and, delirious, full of doubt, dazzled as though by some celestial vision, he fell on both knees. The next day, with the first rays of sunlight, Morel and Valentine were walking arm in arm on the shore, Valentine telling Morel how Monte Cristo had appeared in her room, how he had revealed everything to her, how he had made her unveil the criminal and, finally, how he had miraculously saved her from death, while letting everyone believe that she was dead. They had found the door to the grotto open and had gone out. The last stars were still shining in the blue of the morning sky. And, in the half-light of a cluster of rocks, Morrel saw a man waiting for a sign to come over to them. He pointed him out to Valentine.
"Oh, that's Jacopo," she said, motioning to him to join them. "The captain of the yacht." "Do you have something to tell us?" Morrel asked. "I have this letter to give you on behalf of the Count."
From the Count, the two young people exclaimed in unison.
"Yes, read it." Morrel opened the letter and read. "My dear Maximilian, there is a felucca lying at anchor for you.
Jacopo will take you to Leghorn, where Monsieur Noirtier is awaiting his granddaughter, whom he wishes to bless before she follows you to the altar. Everything that is in this grotto, my friend, my house in the Champs-Élysées and my little country house in Loutreport are a wedding present from Edmond Dantes to the son of his master, Morrel. Mademoiselle de Villefort must have half of it, because I beg her to give the poor people of Paris whatever money she is coming to her from her father, who has become mad, and her brother, who died last September with her stepmother. Tell the angel who will watch over your life, Morrel, to pray sometimes for a man who, like Satan, momentarily thought himself the equal of God and who, with all the humility of a Christian, came to realize that in God's hands alone reside supreme power and infinite wisdom. These prayers may perhaps ease the remorse that he takes with him in the depth of his heart. As for you, Morrel, this is the whole secret of my behavior towards you. There is neither happiness nor misfortune in this world, there is merely the comparison between one state and another, nothing more. Only someone who has suffered the deepest misfortune is capable of experiencing the heights of felicity. Maximilian, you must needs have wished to die, to know how good it is to live. So, do live and be happy, children dear to my heart, and never forget that, until the day when God deigns to unveil the future to mankind, all human wisdom is contained in these two words, wait and hope. Your friend Edmond Dantes. Count of Monte Cristo. While he was reading this letter, which informed her of her father's madness and the death of her brother, neither of which she had known until then, Valentine went pale and gave a painful sigh. Tears, no less touching for being silent, ran down her cheeks. She had purchased her happiness at a high price. Morrel looked around him anxiously. "But the Count really is being too generous," he said. "Valentine will be happy with my modest fortune. Where is the Count, my friend? Take me to him." Jacopo pointed to the horizon. "Why? What do you mean?" Valentine asked. "Where is the Count? Where is Haiti?" "Look," said Jacopo. The two young people looked in the direction towards which the sailor was pointing and, on the dark blue line on the horizon that separated the sky from the Mediterranean, they saw a white sail, as large as a gull's wing. "He is gone," cried Morrel. "Gone! Farewell, my friend." "My father." "Yes, he is gone," Valentine muttered. "Farewell, my friend." "Farewell, my sister." "Who knows if we shall ever see them again?" Morrel said, wiping away a tear. "My dearest," said Valentine, "has the Count not just told us that all human wisdom was contained in these two words, wait and hope?" The end. About the author. Alexandre Dumas was born in 1802 at Villers-Cotterêts. His father, the illegitimate son of a marquis, was a general in the revolutionary armies, but died when Dumas was only 4. He was brought up in straitened circumstances and received very little education. He joined the household of the future king, Louis Philippe, and began reading voraciously. Later he entered the cenacle of Charles Nodier and started writing. In 1829 the production of his play, Henri III Sécourt, heralded 20 years of successful playwriting. In 1839 he turned his attention to writing historical novels, often using collaborators such as Auguste Maquet to suggest plots or historical background. His most successful novels are The Count of Monte Cristo, which appeared during 1844-5, and The Three Musketeers, published in 1844.
Other novels deal with the wars of religion and the revolution.
Dumas wrote many of these for the newspapers, often in daily installments, marshalling his formidable energies to produce ever more in order to pay off his debts. In addition, he wrote travel books, children's stories, and his memoirs, which describe most amusingly his early life, his entry into Parisian literary circles, and the 1830 Revolution.
He died in 1870. Pigeon, publishing house, presented The Count of Monte Cristo. Author, Alexandre Dumas. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. We hope you enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed this classic, follow the show and leave a quick review, and join us every Tuesday and Thursday for more timeless stories.